Lore Together is proud to be part of the Boss Rush Games network. Feel free to find out more at bossrushgames.com/network. Hi, I'm Safi.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where a husband and wife team go over all the world building, stories, and characters of your favorite video games. Because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yes, and this is episode 45.
Which is about the number of tries I needed to get this intro right. But that's another story for another day.
But before we get into the episode, if you'd like to contact us, you can do that on Twitter at Lore Together, on Instagram at Lore Together, or you can contact us through email at loretogether@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support our podcast and help us reach awesome goals like getting a PlayStation console so we can start running and ability to stream consoles and stuff, that'd be fun.
Woo!
You can do that over on patreon.com/loretogether, where you can also gain early access to episodes as well as mini episodes and Q&As and other stuff that we really should be doing more of.
Well, we should be.
But we'll have more time soon, hopefully.
Why is it that my birthday's in September. For some reason, this year, my birthday month is the busiest month that I've ever
had
had.
No actual weekend fully free for quite a while now.
Right.
So.
At least one of those was a vacation.
So, I said we're going to do an MMO.
You did.
We're doing an MMO franchise, but I don't know if the game we're specifically covering I would call an MMO.
How so?
Okay, so we're going to be doing Guild Wars.
Ah.
But Guild Wars 1 is kind of what we're mostly covering the pre-story for Guild Wars 1. All the stuff that happens up until Guild Wars 1 starts.
Okay.
And the problem there is Guild Wars 1 is not an MMO in the sense that we think of it now.
Okay.
If you go to a city in Guild Wars 1, you'll see everyone else who's in that city on your server.
Okay.
But once you leave that city, it's just you and your party.
Oh.
It's instanced. So it's more like...
Well, I feel like Star Trek Online does a similar thing.
A little bit.
Not exactly the same, but pretty similar. There's spots where you can all be together, and then there's spots for your individual points.
But in this case, it's more like a point-and-click RPG that you can play with friends.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different thing. But anyway, we're not here to talk about gameplay mechanics. We're here to talk about lore. Guild Wars, all of Guild Wars, takes place on the planet of Tyria.
Tyria. Sounds like Terra. I can dig it. It's a little different. It's not trying too hard.
Tyria is both the planet and the largest continent.
That's fair. I'll take that too.
South of Tyria, the continent, obviously, is Elona.
It's all Elona?
Elona is... So Tyria runs the gamut of environments.
Okay.
For the most part. Elona is pretty much the African-inspired area.
Okay. Be careful how you say this.
I know. It kind of runs the gamut as well.
Side note, advocating for a proper understanding of Africa, the continent.
True. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I just want to say Africa has pretty much most, if not all, the biomes that we find on planet Earth. Probably not the coldest.
Right.
But deserts and jungles and mountains and waterfalls and...
Yeah, we're talking jungles, we're talking waterfalls, we're talking deserts.
From very well modernized and urbanized to just dirt for animals. Like, the whole gamut.
Right.
It's a very big, and it is a bigger continent than people realize because of the maps that we look at to understand the world, because a 2D map will never truly represent
correct
3D world. I understand that feels like you're like, why is Safi going on this tangent? It's a big deal. We need to just be better about how we represent other parts of the world that are not our own little United States of America.
Right. I should have just gone with Elona is often called the land of the golden sun.
Okay.
You can kind of get that. There's pyramids, kind of structures. There's ancient kingdoms. There's the people here are predominantly dark skinned. It's
you
kind of...
could also be talking about South America too when you say that, though.
Fair point. This is what I get for spitballing my descriptions instead of writing them out.
Okay. if you had said it's a place of pyramids and ancient civilizations and everything, like, I think you would have been fine.
Okay. And then far south of Elona is Cantha, which is, we could call that East Asian inspired design. I could understand that. Again, we don't want mountainous forests,
but yeah,
dragons. You have the stereotypical architecture you would have in China or Japan, depending on your era. Sure. There are more land masses, but we have no official names or even any real confirmation that they exist. There's basically a few maps that people have found that's like, that's not something we know about, but there's no information.
Yeah, so that's a lot like a lot of the other fantasy worlds we've covered, like Dragon Age, of course, is the first one that comes to my mind, have similar conceits of, like, you don't know everything, but you know most of everything.
Well, here we don't know most of everything.
Okay.
Tyria is the largest continent. We know that. But if you look at, in Guild Wars 2, there is a thing called the Order of Whispers. If you go into their hideout, there is a globe.
Oh.
And when people saw the globe and, like, got the texture, it was, like, big news for the lore people, because it was the first time they could actually see the world even.
Right, exactly.
Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 are 250 years apart.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff that happens in between those. We're not going to cover any of that, but just be aware of that when we do eventually talk about it.
And it's always good for MMO to have some distance between the games as well. You don't want them to be completely sequels.
We're going to cover everything before Guild Wars 1 starts. Guild Wars 1 comes in 3.5 different games.
Okay.
You have Guild Wars Prophecies, which is Tyria.
Okay.
You have Guild Wars Factions, which is Cantha. And then you have Nightfall, which is Elona. And then 0.5 is Eye of the North, which ties Guild Wars 1 and starts laying the groundwork for Guild Wars 2.
Okay.
So we are going to cover those first three, Prophecies, Factions, and Nightfall, in the timeline that leads up to Prophecies. We're not going to go beyond that.
Okay.
Which is still about 2,000 years of history. We're going to do broad strokes and cover only major events. We're not going to worry about lineages and dynasties and rulers changing and all that stuff.
And who begot who and all of that stuff.
Right. Which we do have that information for some of this.
So you're saying that it's biblical in the way it's recorded to a certain extent. It's ancient history.
Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes.
Okay.
And you've played Guild Wars 2. You've never played Guild Wars 1, as far as I know.
No, I remember you used to be very into Guild Wars 1, and I tried to get into Guild Wars 2. I just don't think I'm into MMOs. I tried that around the time that Guild Wars 2 came out. Also, Star Trek Online came out soon after that. And I tried them. I thought it might be fun. And I don't know. I don't like something that open-ended when it comes to mission-based kind of games. I don't know why.
I would say Guild Wars 2 is better about it than Star Trek Online. We've had this discussion before.
Oh, yeah. No. I barely touched that after a point.
But I think the difference when it comes to Guild Wars is what doesn't do what a lot of games do. A lot of games have leveled progression.
Yeah.
Guild Wars, when you get to a certain point, everything is horizontal progression.
It's more like a skill tree thing or something
Yeah,
like that?
it's more trying out different builds, make your own mission, do what you want type stuff. If you don't want to do the story, you don't have to. Not doing the story does kind of leave you out of a lot of things, though. Anyway, there's 3 calendars in Guild Wars.
Well, they have 3 continents, 3 calendars.
Yeah, one from each human civilization. We'll be using the Movelian calendar, which is the one that's used in Tyria. It is the most widely used.
Right.
And just for the sake of convenience, a year is 360 days. So it's roughly our time scale.
Roughly, yeah.
And interestingly enough, it's not broken into months.
Is it seasons?
It's into seasons, and each season is 90 days.
Yep. I did something like this in a D&D campaign where I didn't want to think about it too much. It was basically you had like 96 days in each season, and that was your calendar year. Right.
So we're going to actually start, there's 2 different eras, BE and AE. We'll get to what E is when we get to 0.
Okay.
And we're going to start way back in 1769 BE.
That's when things just started to be.
No, actually, we can go back even further, but we're talking species of certain creatures go extinct for for reasons we don't know. There's no movement of. So I should actually preface this now. There are races that are native to Tyria.
Right.
We don't have timelines going this far back for all of them.
Okay.
And because Guild Wars 1, you play as humans. There is no other races to play as.
Okay.
The storyline is only about humans at this point.
Okay.
For the most part. I mean, there's a couple other races we'll be working in, but it's really only we're going to be covering humans this time.
Right. Well, I remember that was literally in Guild Wars. You really could only play humans.
Mm-hmm. So in 1769 BE, the Forgotten arrive on Tyria. Now, the Forgotten are snake-like beings. They stand upright. They got 4 arms. They're placed on the world by the gods to guide other races.
Sounds like their design is similar to the Yuan-Ti in like Dungeons and Dragons monster manuals.
Reading about them, I was reminded more of a little bit of angels. Not like in looks, but in like, you're not the chosen ones. You're there to help me.
Oh, okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of the servants of the gods.
Right.
And then like almost 1,000 years later, in 786 BE, the 6 gods first appear in Cantha, bringing humanity with them. Humans are not native to Tyria.
But they were just kind of planted there?
So it is not incorrect to say that humans and their gods, their 6 gods, are aliens.
Are we doing the Ancient Alien Civilization episode of Lore Together? Because that's what it feels like.
But whether they got there from another planet or through what is called the mists, we don't quite know.
So I guess it's a question of whether it's more otherworldly or if it's more supernatural. Like,
right.
Is it,
we don't know.
Like divine versus cosmological, I guess.
Yeah. We just know the gods appeared and brought humanity with them.
Hey, I heard that you needed some ruling over the domain of natural spheres.
And the 6
I brought
gods...
my pets.
Yeah. And the gods... humanity begins in Cantha. We know that.
Okay.
And the 6 gods, just for sake... the 6 gods at this point, are Dwayna, goddess of healing, air, warmth, and life.
Okay.
Melandru, goddess of nature, earth, and growth.
Okay.
Lissa, the twin goddesses, Lis and Illa, of beauty, water, and illusion.
That's why there's 2 of them.
Abaddon, god of water and knowledge.
Okay.
And Doom, Dhuum, god of death. At some point, I don't remember where, Doom is succeeded by Grenth, which you may have heard that name before.
I may have, yeah.
Abaddon we'll get to. Well, kind of. And that's kind of where we end with that part. 786 BE. Next major thing we see is 462 BE, still in Cantha. And we have an empire established at this point. There's no...
of humanity?
Humanity has established an empire in Cantha.
Wait, remind me. So, from when Cantha was first implanted with aliens...
786 BE.
And now it's been, 300 something?
About 300 years.
About 300 years now, they've been able to establish an empire.
Mm-hmm.
So not only were humans brought, but it wasn't like a caveman situation. No. They were already kind of an established, sophisticated, sentient race.
Yes, plus they have the guides of the Forgotten.
Right. So that combination of the 2 means that what took us millennia took them only 3 centuries to establish. Okay.
Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work as well as everyone thinks. This is in 462. By this point, there's been a death of the emperor by unknown causes, and his son has taken over. His son is a bit ruthless, and we eventually have a people called the Luxons seceding from the empire and becoming a vassal clan.
A vassal clan. So essentially, they're like, we're gonna go do our own thing over here.
They are nomadic peoples who are persecuted by the empire. They left because they were persecuted, and they travel the Jade Sea. They basically sail the Jade Sea.
What were they persecuted for?
It's kind of hard to tease that out of the wikis.
Okay.
And Factions was the one that I played the least of.
Oh, okay.
So I have no personal remembrance of it.
Well, I'm just trying to think of, like, if it was a belief system or...
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And then later on, in 459 BE, another group called the Kurziks declare independence from Cantha and become a vassal clan as well.
Okay.
They are highly spiritual people living in the Echovold forest. And they were also dealing with persecution from the empire, probably for religious reasons. And both the Luxons and the Kurziks have been pretty much bitter enemies since before they each left the Empire.
So they were stuck in an empire that didn't like them,
Right.
and they couldn't even be bothered to be tolerant of each other.
Right.
Okay.
In fact, these two are the factions that are referenced in the title Guild Wars. Factions.
Okay.
Because what you can do in factions is back one or the other, and slowly, like if your guild backs somebody, you are changing like the territories and stuff for these two factions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I never got involved in that myself.
Well, it's kind of got an RTS quality to it.
Not as fast, but yeah.
Well, I mean, have you played a 1,000-round game of Civilization?
I haven't played a 5-round game of Civilization. I'm terrible at them.
Should ask. So side note, my brother loves Civ. That is like one of his favorite series.
205 BE. Now that we have these people splitting off from Cantha, humans finally travel out of Cantha.
Okay.
So we finally are leaving Cantha, and they settle in Or, which is like an island chain,
Okay.
before finding their way to Elona and the islands of Istan. Now, Or is technically part of Tyria. It's actually pretty far north. If you look at a map, they would go all the way north and then go down to Istan. It's really weird, but the trek to Elona and the Isle of Istan would be over land.
Okay.
But to leave Or, this island chain, you'd have to go north over more water or over to Elona.
Okay.
And once you get to Elona, you'd have to go south, because if you went north or west, you'd be going over the Crystal Sea, which you're not going to... Like, if you're going over... Land is the easiest thing.
Right, of course.
And really quickly, like... So we get there in 205 BE. In 200 BE, the primeval kings rule Elona from the city of Faranar in Istan.
So there's no other sentient race that has had a foothold in Elona, or did they just pull a colonial kind of, sort of, not really?
I do not think there's a sentient race in Elona at this point.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I don't think any of the other races are in this area.
I just was wondering. And again, like, I shouldn't say pull a colonial, because they could have been sharing it. It could have been a lot more of a symbiotic relationship, but still, if they're immigrating, I guess my question is, are they immigrants alone on a new frontier without any other
For
people
Elona,
to share it with?
For Elona, I believe they are. I can't think of another race that was in Cantha. The races that we know from Guild Wars 2 are mostly from Tyria.
Okay. So they're probably in different parts of Tyria.
Yes.
Rather than
And we'll get to
Cantha.
one of them later.
Yeah, okay.
During the reign of the primeval kings, and I don't quite have a time for this, so I just kind of tossed at the beginning, one of their queens, Queen Nadija, founds...
Wait, what's her name?
Nadija?
Not
Nadijeh.
the way you said it, it sounds like not a gen. Like, I'm not a gen. No, I'm not a gen.
Founds the Order of the Sun Spears, which is this militia that uses magical and military abilities to protect the innocent, oppose any harm to the new nation, and eventually they serve as rulers, and they become so respected that people have like this awe and like build temples.
So it sounds like a bunch of paladins who were so good at their job that
Yeah.
they became demigods almost.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
175 BE, Morganite settlements appear along the northern and western coastlines of Elona. Their vessels rule over the unending ocean, which is kind of the ocean that kind of goes around Tyria.
Okay.
The Morganites, I think they're humans, but I think it's a different culture of humans, and there's not a lot on them. We can get to that why later.
So they're not an offshoot of the implanted humans of Cantha like everybody else we've been talking about? Okay, they are.
I believe they are. The Morganites are kind of lost to history in a lot of ways, and we'll get to why in a little bit. 100 BE. Humans of the high plains of Tyria, because we made it to Tyria through Or eventually by this point, found Ascalon and drive the Char, a cat-like humanoid warrior race, from the lands of Ascalon.
Uh-oh.
So the Char we know from Guild Wars 2.
Yes.
Guild Wars 1, they are enemies for the most part until we get to Eye of the North.
So, funny story, when Guild Wars 2 was new, there was a lot of people on the forums asking Guild Wars 2, like, why was my name banned? And a lot of it was just offensive names they weren't just going to have happen. Guild Wars 2 has always tried to curb that. But this one person said, I'm really confused. I thought mine was just funny. And they go, well, wait, what was your name? And he goes, it was Wyston Churchill. And they were like, what? Literally, I think somebody else who was a moderator for Guild Wars 2 said, I don't know why that got banned. I'm going to have to look into that because that seems perfectly within our code of conduct. Yeah.
So at this point, when the humans drive the Char out of Ascalon, King Doric is crowned, and Ascalon and Cantha actually establish relations. So this is now two of the nations are trading at this point.
Okay.
We get all the way to 1 BE.
So 1 year before things get so big, it's historical.
Yeah.
And changes how we read time. All right.
Abaddon gives the gift of magic to the sentient races of Tyria.
Okay.
This results in immediate and bloody wars.
Yeah, that would do it, wouldn't it? Right? Like, let's think about this. This is exactly why everybody's afraid of the mutants in the X-Men. This is exactly it. Like, you just don't understand what it is. Except, I mean, I guess fair playing field that everybody gets it, but if everybody gets it...
Right. Now, it wasn't Abaddon himself that did this. All the gods were like, we should give them magic. But
Abaddon is the font of knowledge.
Yes. And in 0 BE, so I haven't gotten to what the E is yet. We'll get to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. King Doric travels to Ara in Or to beg the gods to take back their gift.
Whoa.
And the gods heard his plea and created the Bloodstones, which limited the use of magic. Basically restrained how much magic people could use and which ones. There was one bloodstone for each school of magic: preservation, destruction, aggression, and denial. Gets weird.
Denial is illusion, I assume, or something.
Kind of, yeah. Okay. Or preservation, healing. Destruction, obvious for the most part. It also plays into gameplay, which is the weird part. It's not the way your brain really thinks of it. And the wiki also classifies it in gameplay terms, which is... they're like, oh, destruction is AoE stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't explain the lore. Like, that just explains.
Destruction is basically, you dropped a bomb on me.
It's literally called nuking, yeah.
Okay.
And there was a 5th stone to act as a keystone.
Okay.
The stones were sealed with King Doric's blood, hence the name, and his
what's his name again?
King Doric.
King, like...
But it's Doric, but it's sealed with his blood. That's why it's a bloodstone.
Doric? Doric?
Yeah.
You keep saying King Dork.
Doric.
I keep hearing Dork.
No. But sorry if that's been what you've been hearing.
Okay, I just want to clarify it for everyone. I'm hoping it's not just me who heard it like that, because I was like, there's no way they let that happen as in the writer's room.
No, it's Doric. Doric.
Doric, okay.
And his dynasty is put in charge of protecting the Bloodstones. And the Bloodstones were then put into the largest volcano in the Ring of Fire Islands. Abaddon protested this all, God of Knowledge.
Yes, he's like, wait a second, we can't be locking away things that we wanted people to know.
And upon learning they had gone ahead and done all this, he and the Morganites fought the other gods.
Well, that's doomed.
Killing their priests in the Temple of the Six Gods, desecrating their altars, defacing statues. Eventually the Forgotten, the servants of the gods, get really antsy about this, launch their navy, and confront the Morganites. And there is just massive war between the gods and all their servants and everything.
Yep.
In the end, Abaddon was defeated at the mouth of Torment. It's like this twisted rift that connects to the realm of Torment to Elona. Mm-hmm. The war had been very fierce, though. The Crystal Sea was gone.
Well, like they just because of the powers of the gods.
Because the powers were just so intense, the sea was gone, and it turned into the Crystal Desert.
So they just kind of I needed this water for power. Oh, crap. I've just left nothing but salt and disrepair.
Abaddon and the Morganites were cast into the realm of Torment, a realm in the mists which would act as his prison. I mean, you can't really just get rid of him.
Yeah.
And then the 5 other gods leave into the mists to go found a new world that is free of these problems. It is called the Exodus of the Gods. That is why it is BE and AE.
Before Exodus, after Exodus.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So literally...
We screwed up. Let's start again.
We screwed up. We should never have given them any knowledge.
It's more like we screwed up. We have to find a place to start anew, and then we'll bring them here.
So we're making a new precious world for what? Just the humans?
That part I don't know.
So there's this promise of that they'll return, but we don't know when?
I don't know if there's a promise that they'll return. That's what we're told, and I don't remember when we're told that. We could have been told that in Guild Wars 2 for all I know.
Okay.
Because we do actually talk to the gods in Guild Wars 2 at one point.
Oh, whoa, yikes. Okay.
It's kind of an awesome mission. It's a pain in the butt mission, but it's kind of an awesome mission.
Okay.
2 AE, so second year after Exodus. Or becomes a nation finally. It's just kind of been colonies and stuff like that at this point.
Yeah.
29 after Exodus, the primeval king spread into Vabi and the Desolation. The Desolation is kind of this area that was, well, basically a wasteland next to the Crystal Sea.
Okay.
And now it's kind of spreading into the Crystal Desert, and it gets yeah. So, and they also begin burying their dead rulers in the Crystal Desert, hence pyramids. Okay.
So they're making pyramids in the Crystal Desert to honor their dead. Okay.
174 after Exodus, the Forgotten leave the world of men, settling in the Crystal Desert. Basically, they're like, all right, we're done. Bye. 221 AE, Cantha and the other human nations all actually begin trading. We're talking Elona, Cantha, Ascalon.
Yeah.
They're all trading at this point. Or 272 AE, the dragon Glint compiles the Flameseeker prophecies, which foretell many events and figures that will come to pass.
Oh.
Though, like many predictions, understanding them is vague at best. Glint is a major figure, especially when you start getting into Guild Wars 2.
Okay.
Because a lot of the hero characters that we meet in Guild Wars 2 were part of a party that dealt with Glint.
Oh.
And Glint is a friendly dragon. There's a lot of stuff about dragons. The dragons are a force still. They're in hibernation at this point. They're asleep.
Okay.
They don't get woken up until after prophecies, until after what we're covering today.
Okay.
300 AE, Kryta is established as a colony of Elona and would become an independent nation in 358 AE. Kryta is actually where, if you play a human in Guild Wars 2, you're in Kryta.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Divinity's Reach, Lion's Arch, that's all Kryta.
Okay, that makes sense.
452 AE, the Scarab Plague sweeps through Elona, decimating the population.
Whoa.
The royal house is destroyed, Easton is abandoned, and the reign of the primeval kings comes to an end. And it's pretty graphic, some of the stuff that you read with the Scarab Plague. Literal bugs will burst out of your skin.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh. That's gruesome.
Yeah. It's
oh, my gosh.
pretty, and like they say they also found like boreholes in people's bones.
No. And do we know where these scarabs came from?
No, and the funny thing is, 456 AE, the Scarab Plague ends, and nobody understands at all why it disappeared. There's no data on why it vanished.
So my fear is that it's like cicadas. Like they just rest for centuries at a time, and then they come out and they're like, it's time
It
to
does
go!
come back in Guild Wars 2, but there's extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah. That one we know why it comes back.
Okay, that's fair.
And in 456 AE, after the Scarab Plague ends, the Great Dynasty is founded. Later on, 520 AE, after the Scarab Plague has decimated everything, finally, 70 years later, or almost 70 years later, people finally begin to settle back in the Eastern Islands.
Yeah, it would probably take a generation before people were like, hey, I know that there were this claim of these beetles that would bore through people, but I think they're gone now, so we can go back and settle there, right? It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like why people find going back to Chernobyl like a tourist attraction now. It's like the distance between the tragedy, the horrific tragedy itself, is so far that now it's kind of just more this intrigue.
Yeah. And then about 60 years after, there's a lot of Elona in this, because Elona is probably the one we have the most information about going this. Like we know Cantha, different years or eras start, or different emperors are born, but there's not like any major events that happen for the most part up until we're getting to one soon. So Elona has a lot of these big events that have been kind of embellished on over the...
And also culturally, you could kind of perceive it as like who thinks what is considered historical. And
that's
if
fair.
Cantha, if only you think of it as like certain records of certain important people, that's different than, say, Elona, who thinks that it's more about major events that happen.
It could also be that in Guild Wars 2, we've been to the jungle in Tyria, which was Heart of Thorns.
Right.
Which we don't cover any of that here. There's a little bit about Bloodstones and stuff. We're not going to touch that at all. Then there's Path of Fire, which is all in Elona.
Okay.
And all in that area of the world. Cantha is coming up in the next expansion, which is going to be in February.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's just the fact that we don't have that fine detail because we haven't had a DLC take place there that they can fill in the timeline for Guild Wars 1, being like, oh, here's the stuff that happened before factions.
Okay. That's understandable too.
Right.
I just like thinking retroactively how you can explain it away as well.
So the Great Dynasty was founded in 456 AE, as we said. In 583 AE, the Great Dynasty collapses. It lasts just over a century.
Okay,
Wars break out and the Shattered Dynasty era begins. Eventually, by 640 AE, Elona would emerge as 3 different allied provinces, Karuna, Easton, and Vabi.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in 757 AE, the undead lich Palawa Joko emerges, intent on ruling Elona through magic, fear, and an army of mummies.
Okay, interesting.
He builds his bone palace in the Desolation, from which he will launch attacks against his neighbors as he conducts his war of conquest. Palawa Joko is someone that I am unfortunately intimately familiar with at this point, since I have just finished fighting him about a week ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He is undead. He is a lich.
Oh, liches.
862 AE, Turai Osa defeats Palawa Joko at the Battle of Jahai.
Whoa. There's so many nouns you just threw at me right there. Oh my gosh.
Turai Osa also forms the Order of Whispers, a name you might be familiar with, which is formed and seals away Palawa Joko. Basically, Palawa Joko's undead.
Right.
And so Turai Osa literally just like, we're going to put him under a big rock so he can't get out.
This feels like this. Why does this remind me of Arcanum with the idea of like the easiest thing to do is just put him in a hole and plug that hole.
Well,
like,
they do the same thing in Geyser Arcadia with Yelgar. They just put him.
Yes.
They can't figure out how to destroy him. The yellow guy gets, so they just put him in the middle of Valoa and put a great seal over him.
All right, like we're just gonna tuck you away now and hope that like it's almost like it's a parable about how humans deal with difficult history, because that is also something
Sweep it
we
under the rug.
Yeah, we're just not gonna talk about it. Bye.
All right, so 872 AE, we finally get something interesting happening in Cantha. There's been other stuff happening, but this is the first one that I found interesting. Shiro Tagachi, who is an assassin,
Okay.
is slain in the Harvest Temple in Cantha after killing Emperor Angxian
Okay, so first we had an emperor assassinated,
by Shiro.
and then the assassin was assassinated.
Yes.
Okay.
However,
Very.
Emperor Angxian was kind of channeling Dwayna and like drawing power from Dwayna at the time.
Oh, whoa.
And so Shiro kind of absorbed and kind of corrupted this energy. And as a result of this abundance of energy that he'd absorbed, his death cry creates what's called the Jade Wind, which exploded out and petrified the land. Literally, the Echovold Forest is petrified, and the Jade Sea is literally turned to jade.
Wow. But I've always liked this idea in magic is that, like, it's about a power flow through the human, and they're kind of like this conduit of power.
Right.
And you can mess that up if you don't correct that power flow before death.
Right.
It's like a landmine almost. You've got to try to trigger it the right way so that it doesn't blow up everywhere.
And they did a trailer for Factions where you see this scene. You see him get killed by an assassin, and literally this cry goes out, and birds are flying through the air, and then they fall to the ground as jade.
Oh God. That's one of the things a way that I don't want to die. That's definitely one of them.
898 AE, the Great Northern Wall is erected in Ascalon, blocking any Char movement to the south. So basically they're walling them off so that they can't attack anymore.
Because that worked great in history. Anytime a civilization decided they were going to block any kind of immigration or conflict with a wall. Never fails. You can ask the Great Wall of China.
1017 AE, the Luxons and the Kurziks end all former diplomatic contact, communicating only when required through liaisons of the Celestial Ministry.
So these were the two groups that kind of like were part of the
They've
Empire.
been fighting this whole time in like little Cold Wars or little heat ups, and yeah.
And now they're just like, well, now I'm just not even going to talk to you.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk to you when I'm mad. I don't even want to smack you. You need to talk to... It's basically like a horrible divorce where it's just the two attorneys talking to each other and their clients can't be in the same room.
Right.
Okay.
Finally, our last entry, and this is the one that you're going to get to actually see.
Cool.
Because you're going to be playing Guild Wars 1 in the stream.
This will be... I don't think this is going to go as poorly as me trying to stealth. So I think this will be
It is a very
fun.
different game type than what you're used to for an MMO, though.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, this is like how many years older than Guild Wars 2?
I want to say 2005?
So it's at least 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Well, Guild Wars 2 just celebrated its 9th anniversary, and I want to say Guild Wars 1 just celebrated its 15th? Yeah, 15th.
Oh,
just
I thought it was
last
older.
year, I think.
I thought it was older than that. Okay.
Yeah. I could be wrong. I think that's what it is, though.
Okay.
So, 1070 AE. Years of fighting between the Ascalon and the Char take a turn with the Searing. This is the day the Char figured out how to breach the Great Northern Wall.
Yeah, dude, see that? I could see that coming from a
Funny thing
mile
is,
away.
when you start playing Guild Wars 1, you will start that day.
Really?
Yes. And the funny thing about Guild Wars 1 is there's two different time periods it takes place in.
Okay.
One is the day that the Char breached the wall,
Okay.
and then once the Char breached the wall, you jump forward 2 years.
Whoa.
There is a whole community. They only play during what's called pre-searing.
Interesting.
And there are certain things you can only get during pre-searing.
Wow.
Yeah. Pre-searing is nice, though. It's probably one of the nicest tutorial beginner areas I've seen in a game.
There's a whole faction of people who are just like, the tutorial's so lit that I don't see the need of the rest of the game.
At this point, I would say it's the most nostalgic. It's more nostalgia than anything.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. That said, the fact that there was a part of an MMO that you can't go back to,
Yeah.
like a tutorial level, like Guild Wars 2 has a tutorial mission. You start the tutorial mission, you're done.
Right.
This has a whole area with quests, shop, dungeons. It's more than just one mission. It's a whole map that you can't go back to.
It's a tutorial experience, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a lot I just threw at you. And of course, this is covering 3 games worth of pre-timeline.
We've covered thousands of years worth of history, and I don't know how comfortable I am with that. That just seemed I do think you got a lot of the high notes, but
yeah.
I love the little detail things, because that's, as you guys know, that's what I cover when I do stuff.
So there's the one thing they didn't have in the timeline, which I found very interesting. They only had one mention of the actual Guild Wars.
Oh, right. The whole reason we're here.
There's a third Guild War somewhere in there. It's literally just one line. The third Guild War happens.
What?
Don't know where the first or second one happened in the timeline. So here's what actually happened.
Yeah.
And this actually ties back to what we talked about for 0 AE.
The Exodus.
For the Exodus and the Bloodstone. Remember when I said they put the Bloodstone in the volcano?
Yeah.
The volcano erupted and scattered the Bloodstones, which also weakened their ability to control the magic.
Right.
And then all these different nations of humanity, which aren't allied, which they're allied, but they're not united.
No, of course not.
All had guilds, all had different groups under them who would foster trade or do missions and all that stuff. They all moved out and fought over the Bloodstones.
Of course they did, because they want the power of it all.
Yes, and this all started when that explosion happened in that volcano and didn't end until the Searing.
Oh.
Because now there's a problem with humanity. Like now there's a unifying thing of the Char have breached, Ascalon's in trouble. And the funny thing is all the... But before we get to Guild Wars 2, other events happen which all of these different groups of people all like have to emigrate, have to leave. Mm-hmm. And so Kryta becomes this melting pot that it wasn't before, which is why you have so many different types of people up there. compared to where it would be in Guild Wars 1.
Right, where everybody's a little bit more spread out.
Yeah. So it was funny that they didn't cover that in the timeline that I saw.
Wow, interesting. So wait, but the humans are trying to pursue these bloodstones. I'm assuming they're not the only race of people who are trying to...
No, they're not. There are other races. I believe the Mersat is a race that has tried to possess them. Obviously, there are factions within the individual races that will try to possess them or use them for other means.
Right.
The bloodstones are a thing that we could actually do a whole episode themselves on.
Which we should in the future, obviously.
Yeah. I don't intend on doing many other MMOs. Obviously, we have this one. We have Elder Scrolls as an MMO. I don't anticipate doing many other ones just yet because they are so big and so unwieldy.
Yeah, and sometimes they are almost intentionally a mess, right? Because they have to appeal to a wide audience. So there's certain storylines that aren't going to fit as well with each other. Mm-hmm. Like, bless its heart, but World of Warcraft is just so much going on in there, and it's satisfying so many people's itch for like gaming online, and I'm happy for everybody who's into that, but that I don't know. It's its own little culture thing, and I'm sure there's a podcast out there who's got it.
Yeah,
you know.
I know there's a couple of Guild Wars podcasts, so. And
the same kind of with. There's some other MMOs where it's like, do you really want to do it? What was the one where I told my mother, would you like spreadsheets? Then you would like this.
EVE
MMO.
Online.
Yes.
So, funnily enough, I do play other MMOs.
You do?
Guild Wars seems to be one that most of my friends who do play go back to the most.
Right.
So.
Though I've heard people criticize it.
There's stuff to criticize, for sure, just as in any game. Horizontal progression can feel kind of meaningless after a while.
Right.
It can be very difficult to solo, especially if you are like one of our friends who has a physical handicap. It can be very difficult.
Yes, I remember.
It is more skill-based than build-based in a way.
That's probably part of the reason why I just...
Yeah. Guild Wars 1 is more... If you know how to play Magic the Gathering,
right,
you'll be better at Guild Wars 1 than 2. Guild Wars 2 requires you to be able to dodge and be active and everything. Guild Wars 1 has less of that.
Yeah, and as everybody knows, I'm really bad with, like, judging distance in a virtual setting.
But anyway, next episode will be in October, so we're going to do a horror game.
Spoopy! We're doing spoopy things. Yay! We missed out on it last year because we were still on the new parent high.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.